How are you navigating your business through the coronavirus outbreak? We've got the Small Business Association of Michigan here with us today to help us through. Welcome again, Rob and Brian. Thank you for coming on the show. Special edition, Focus on Business on Coronavirus. There's a lot going on right now for business. Rob, why don't we hop right into it and start, if you could lead us down what's happening with the economic injury disaster loans today.
Yes, so economic injury disaster loans are set up by the federal government, essentially using the mechanism of the Small Business Administration to do lending. It was $8 billion appropriated by the Congress, but really focused on getting money in the hands of small business owners quickly during this time when small businesses are hurting so badly. So we were promoting this early on, telling our members about it, telling small businesses in the state about it. There have been a couple of changes more recently, and so initially we saw what came out in the law as it was passed through the Congress, and it said these loans could be up to $2 million, and that they are really favorable rates and favorable payback periods and that sort of thing. We've just recently learned that the SBA, as they're administering this program, have limited those to $15,000. So I know that there are a lot of companies out there who are looking to the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and I think they've just gotten some news that is going to be disappointing to some, that there may not be as much money available there as they thought. The other thing is the concept is to initially push out $10,000 of that loan to businesses, and it would be forgiven. It would be a grant, essentially. Got money in their pocket quickly. And a lot of companies, again, were paying attention to that. And we've recently found out it's $1,000 per employee. So I know a lot of very small companies who are looking to that EIDL have just recently learned that there's a limitation on per employee. So sole proprietors who thought maybe they could bring $10,000 into their company to help them survive this whole thing have just recently learned that that may not be the case. This is the nature of this thing. That is, it is changing before our very eyes. Part of what we've been trying to do is keep small businesses in our state informed about what's going on as it's happening, as we get further guidance. I would say it's still something that small businesses should take a look at, but the bigger issue is the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah, and these kinds of announcements from the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, as they relate to the entire scope, I'll transfer that fear right over to the Paycheck Protection Loan. Can these kinds of changes come mid-step with the paycheck loans as well? Now, I'll be transparent here. I own a small company, and we've decided that the Paycheck Protection Program was right for us. We did not go after the economic injury disaster loans. But watching what's going on there, with it going from $2 million to such a small amount, which is $15,000, all kinds of fears are popping up for, I think, the business community. What else could change? Because I have now been approved for the Paycheck Program. So is it the same risk that we have in the Paycheck Program?
Well, Lisa, the Paycheck Protection Program is being implemented through the regular lender network, like your local bank and credit union. And that makes it much more secure since it's already been deployed, approvals are already being issued. Then the idea of going back after the fact and making changes would be much, much less likely. Honestly, we feel very let down by the Small Business Administration. Different than us, we're the Small Business Association of Michigan, but the Small Business Administration, who does these EIDL loans, have now made 3 major changes, and now have turned it into something that was much, much smaller and less effective than it was originally slated to be. But the Paycheck Protection Program, on the other hand, which provides 250% of average monthly payroll, so that businesses, small businesses, can keep their people employed and stay alive for the next couple of months, and pay their rent and mortgage interest and utilities, and not have to pay it back. Since that has gone through the regular lending network with your local bank, that gives me much, much more confidence that this one is going to go through as planned. And every day, more and more banks are coming online to offer the Paycheck Protection Program loans, forgivable loans, and so that means more and more businesses can access them.
So that brings me to another question, and again, it's just really a fear. It's all brand new, and it's all coming out in the worst possible pandemic that we've experienced, and that is the money's going to run out, and I'm told I'm approved, but what if they give out too much money and then start to backpedal? Can that happen with a loan application like this?
For those who have gone through the approval process and your bank told you you're approved, that means that they have they have now submitted your information to the Small Business Administration. They have received back an approval saying that you had a complete and qualified application. That means that you're out of that $350 billion package that Congress passed and the Senate and the President signed, that there's an amount, your loan amount, that is earmarked for you. So once you get to that point, it's just a matter of closing. But what we're working on now is we want to make sure that Congress appropriates more money to this fund, because what seemed like it would be enough a month ago is clearly not enough today. So those who have been fortunate enough to have gone through the whole process, have their application in, got their approval from their bank, the bank has told them you are approved for this, you'll close in the next 10 days after that approval. That's the rules. The bank has to close it within 10 days, and you'll be good to go. So the next major job for us at the Small Business Association of Michigan and small business organizations around the country are to ensure that as the Congress starts to contemplate putting more money into this fund, that it happens. So there's moving through something through Congress is never easy, but in this case, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to get there.
So today is Thursday. The show is going to air on Sunday. Tomorrow, which is before the show airs, something big is going to happen, and that is the Paycheck Protection Program is going to open up to 1099 employees or companies.
Yeah, so there are, so far, Paycheck Protection Program loans have been available for companies that have regular W-2 wage employees. Starting Friday, because this will air on Sunday, that same process will be open to people that either get paid through 1099 wages or are sole proprietors that don't have employees, don't have W-2 wages. Now, every bank will be different. Banks can start doing it on Friday, but not every bank will be ready. Just like, remember when the original program rolled out, not every bank started at the same time. It's going to be the same way with sole proprietors and independent contractors. So check with your bank, ask them, are you accepting applications yet for sole proprietors or independent contractors, 1099 contractors, and get your application in. Those are going to tend to be much smaller applications, so a little bit of money goes a long way with that. But still, we recommend not waiting, to stay out, be persistent. It might be frustrating because it's you got to get through this process. You got to push to make it happen, but be consistent and persistent. It will be worth it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I know that there's more money that they're looking to appropriate, and we'll hope that happens. Rob, I want to turn the conversation a little bit. There's been some things that have happened this week also, or I guess last week, since we're talking on Sunday, with the governor of Michigan.
Right. So I think the big question that a lot of people have been thinking about is how long will this last? And the original executive order called "Stay Home, Stay Safe" was passed on March 23rd, effective March 24th, and it was through April 13, the original executive order. And it was on Friday, it was extended to the 30th of April. This is the executive order that actually created the rules around what we've been saying are essential and non-essential businesses or jobs. But the real language is critical infrastructure. And so companies early on in this executive order had to determine whether they are on the critical infrastructure list. And that meant that they were either providing life-saving services to people, or they were including food and transportation and other things, or they were a supplier to those kinds of companies. That has not changed. You still would have the same status that you had before during this extension. For companies who are still trying to understand what that means and are they critical infrastructure, our website at sbam.org would be a good place to go for a literal flow chart on figuring out whether you are or not. But most companies, I think, have figured out what their status is. Am I able to stay open? Am I not? For the additional extension through April 30th, that has not changed. What has changed, and I think a little refinement of the executive order. So I think what we've all seen pictures of people standing in line at a grocery store or whatever, and they're bunched together. And so you'll see more guidance in this executive order about how many people can be in a store at the same time. For the bigger stores, it's related to the total number of square feet and people per square feet. To a smaller store, it's actually related to the capacity you have under the fire marshal. What's the capacity of your store? It would be 25% of that total capacity. So really trying to limit the number of people who are in a store that is considered critical infrastructure or a place you could go, and really making certain that people are social distancing at least 6 feet apart, even if they're waiting in line. So some of it is, you will also see, I think, some shutting down of non-essential products inside stores that are open. There's been some discussion about whether or not people are going and continuing to buy things that are not considered to be essential. And I think you'll see some limitations, probably literally shutting down some sections of a large grocery store, a Meijer, place like that. So a little more refinement of that executive order, but an extension until April 30th.
So I might not be able to go into the game section or the furniture section or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
I think you might literally see them roped off in some of those stores. You may not be able to buy potting soil or puzzles or furniture, right?
Well, I already bought potting soil, so I'm good there. That's interesting, though, and it is, as a small business person, I think it's fair that if you can't buy it from my little game store, you shouldn't be able to buy it at Meijer right now, right? That it just seems like this sort of flattens out that the fairness curve. Speaking of sort of hot off the press, Brian, I know that you were talking about to someone recently about unemployment.
There have been naturally so many unemployment filings over the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's over 800,000 now. Each week brings a new record. But the big question for business owners has been, when can independent contractors and sole proprietors file? They've never been eligible to apply before, but the federal government and the CARES Act changed that. They expanded eligibility. The Federal Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Labor, has given the rules to the state of Michigan on how they do this. Now the state of Michigan has to turn those rules into reprogramming and instructions for people who are filing. They're in the process of doing that now, but it's apparently not a very easy process. By the time that this airs on Sunday, it may or may not be open. But here's a bit of advice that I wanted to share with you, is that a lot of people, they didn't really know. They heard, I'm a sole proprietor, I can file, and they didn't know that they weren't supposed to file yet. And so they filed and they got denied. And what the State Department of Labor is going to ask is that anybody who got denied, don't file again. They will when you see that it's open and it's okay for self-employed people to file, or 1099 contractors to file, if you've already filed and got denied, they're asking don't file again. They will automatically re-review your account. In fact, if you do refile, even though you got denied, it will slow down the process of you getting approved. So it'll create a kind of a conflict inside the system, that they have the same person denied and approved. And so that actually is going to slow it down. So this is going to be an important message for people that have already been waiting for a very, very long time to not inadvertently do something that might cause that delay to be longer. So I'm recommending that you keep an eye on their website, on the Michigan Unemployment Agency website, and they will announce when it's open. So if you've never applied before but you're planning to, don't do it until you see that it has been opened for you. If you've already applied and been denied, please be patient. They will automatically re-review it.
Well, that's great information. I was listening to one of the SBM 3 o'clock Facebook Lives, which you do every day, and I try very hard to be present for those because I want to know what's happening with everything small business in Michigan. This week, you had a legislator on that was talking about creating a plan for reopening the economy here in Michigan. I'd love for you to share some of that information.
Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey has started a bipartisan process. 3 Republican senators and 3 Democratic senators that are forming a committee to do the work of determining how do we open back up. And even though we know that it won't be until at least after April 30th, it's a really important thing for business owners to know that there is light somewhere at the end of this tunnel, that somebody's working on and working toward opening. And also, I think that we were all heartened to hear just the logical approach and bipartisan approach that they're planning on taking. The idea of recognizing that some jobs are inherently very safe, jobs that you do alone. Some people have some equipment and they mow grass, and that there are very few changes that would have to be made for that job to operate safely right now, even with everything that's happening. On the other end of the spectrum, you have something like going to a concert with 20,000 people. We're nowhere near that being okay yet. And so you look at that wide spectrum of different types of activities and types of professions that are out there, and we know that we need to take a risk-based approach. Those that aren't risky, or those that mitigation steps can be taken, that those will probably roll into place faster than those areas where just the nature of the activity is much, much more difficult to contain the threat of spread of disease. So having that process start up and having Senator Mike Shirkey do it in a way that bends over backward to ensure that it is not political, that it doesn't include any partisan aspects. Republicans have the majority in the Senate, and yet what they're doing is they're saying we're going to give equal authority on this committee to Democrats, and that's quite a statement. That's unusual. It's a sign of really strong leadership, and of course we're very, very thankful for that this process has now started.
Well, I hope we get more of the nonpartisan participation. I think he also mentioned something on your call about people who have had the virus and are now, thought to be immune can go back to work, that would be terrific. Um, Especially if you were in New York and that was a rule, that would, really be something. Here in Michigan, we've kept the lid on it pretty well. So just one more thing I wanted to mention, and that is that on the Paycheck Protection Program, as soon as you get through one hoop, a whole bunch of questions start to pop up again. So for me, I know that one of the things I was thinking about was, how do I spend this money so that I get the maximum forgiveness on this loan? And Rob, can you talk about the resources that you have on that and other things coming up?
Right. The conditions under which this loan is forgivable are pretty clear. You spend it on payroll, rent, and utilities. There's some additional things you can spend it on, but you got to be careful. If you spend it on just those three things, it's forgivable. But there is still a business strategy that business owners are going to have to think about. So we're doing a webinar next Tuesday at 10 a.m. This is a part of a continuing series of just trying to take this a piece by piece, going deep, really trying to understand it. And the webinar is going to be about spending and tracking your PPP loan. We have heard stories about billions of dollars coming into Michigan in PPP loans. So we know lots of businesses are going to be faced with this. So Tuesday, 10 o'clock, you can go to sbam.org and find out more about it. And it's spending and tracking your PPP.
Thank you. We will see you next Sunday. And in the meantime, keep up the great work.
Welcome to Focus on Tech. In this episode, I want to explore the term VPN, Virtual Private Network. If you're working remotely in these times, you've probably heard that term. You've probably experienced issues with the technology that we know of as virtual private networking. What it means is you're connecting a remote computer, a device, through the internet to your corporate network. There's some technology around there that we need to make it secure. Why do we want to do it? Is because we have files on our servers, we have database applications on our servers, we have things inside the network like printers that we need to access. So when we move that computer outside of the office, the only way to get there is through a virtual private network if we want to access all those services. There are other ways that you can get your work done remotely. If your data's in the cloud, your email's in the cloud, your files, etc., then you don't need a virtual private network. You can just access those through your normal login process. But if you have things that are on your network and you moved your computer, your laptop, or your desktop perhaps outside the walls of your building, then you need some type of remote control. Or remote access into that network. One of the things, another way to do that is perhaps with a remote control app. So you leave your desktop in the office, you go home with a laptop or a personal computer, and you run an application that gives you remote control over that device that's in the office. That typically works very well if you have a database application or something that you need to run inside the network. You want to do that. If you have files that you need to access and pull those out and move them around and manipulate them and do things with them on the computer that you have off-site, that's when you need this virtual private network. There are security concerns around virtual private networking. There's typically software that's going to run on your computer, but the firewall that's protecting your private network, if it's configured to allow virtual private networking, it's allowing anyone from anywhere in the world perhaps to get access to the servers, and they would be challenged with a username and a password. But if they guess that username and password, now the corporation's in trouble. So we want to make the virtual private networking as secure as possible. When we do that from a technology perspective, it also makes it more difficult to access. Sometimes there's two-factor authentication requirement. There's a password that's very strong, that's not known to anyone else except you, that is different than any other password, and perhaps you forgot that password. Perhaps there's timeouts. There's lots of technology reasons or issues around virtual private networking. If we can avoid it, we will, but we can't always. So I just want to wish you to be safe out there and to be patient with your technology providers as they get you set up working remotely through a virtual private network or remote control of some other means. Thanks.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
This is Denise Policella. Today on Focus on Legal, we're going to handle the sticky topic of whether or not you can fire your employee of your essential business for refusing to show up to work, even though they're not sick. So, under normal circumstances, even in non-pandemic times, anytime you want to take adverse action against an employee, you should always consult a qualified labor and employment attorney first. And when an employee just flat out refuses to show up to work without any good reason, they've usually quit, and they are considered to have voluntarily quit, and you don't have to fire them. They've done the work for you. But you do want to memorialize this decision of theirs in an acknowledgement that you send to their address of record along with their final check. However, if you have an employee who just doesn't show up to work and they have not indicated that they're intending to quit, legally the safest thing to do right now under the current pandemic, considering all of the different executive orders that have come out recently and all of the different opportunities available to businesses and their employees, you would want to probably place them on an unpaid leave of absence. That's not just the legally safest thing to do at the time, it's probably the most compassionate. Now, that is not to say that the employee cannot be disciplined later or even terminated, but placing them on a leave of absence right now will give them time to reflect on whether or not this is the best course of action for them to take, and it will also give you time as the employer to review your rights and responsibilities and to consult an attorney and to review all of the new executive orders. Most of the responsibilities for employers can be found on the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity State of Michigan website, and I recommend that you visit that regularly in any case. So to review, unpaid leave of absence, taking more permanent action at a later date.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Policella and Associates, PLLC.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next Sunday.